Hi, all, and welcome to episode 36 of Plain Speaking Sanjiv. Today, I want to speak to you about culture shock or cultural differences, basis my experience as a student way back in 1986 when I first went to the US to study. Before that, I just want to touch upon the good news that flights have resumed today in India, domestic flights, on a very limited basis. There are some teething problems, especially on day one, because the rules, number of departures, etc., by airport was being finalized until late last evening. What was approved earlier, on Thursday and Friday, one third of the schedule, eventually had to change a lot in many cities, such as Bombay, for example, where the number of flights that had been approved, number of departures was over 100, but yesterday evening it was reduced to 25. So obviously for airlines, it's not easy to change the schedules and rotations and everything else. But I think they've all done their best overnight. Flights have started operating today. For customers, there'll be some pain potentially because your flight may not operate, may have been cancelled. But again, it's not in the airline's control. They're doing their best. It's a very unusual situation. Each state has got their own concerns and constraints. But in the next day or two, things should smooth out. So again, the good news is we're flying, and hopefully demand picks up and things start gradually returning to normal. So now back to my the core of the topic that I want to talk about today: culture shock or cultural differences between countries. So in September 1986, I landed in the U.S. and my college was Dartmouth College in New Hampshire, beautiful little town nestled in the mountains, in a valley between two mountain ranges. Absolutely picture perfect, pretty town. And I had traveled abroad, since I was a kid because my father was in a multinational company, but I had never lived abroad and never lived on my own abroad. And what I learned and what I saw in the first few weeks I was there, it really left a long-term impression on me. Number one was an example of cultural differences, which I often retell, to my friends in great humor now, but it was quite an experience back then. One of our professors had invited about a dozen of us to lunch at his place, and we all went in and we sat down, and he started asking people, "What do you want to drink?" And somebody would say, "I'll have some coffee." Somebody would say, "I'll have some Coke." Somebody would be very specific and say, "I'll have half a glass of water." And I was thinking to myself, "Hey, oh, how forward and how rude! They're just asking for things." And number two, how strange, half a glass of water, very specific. And I, of course, was used to the Indian or Asian style of, not being too aggressive or forward. So when my turn came and he asked me, "What will you have to drink?" I said, "Nothing, thank you." Expecting that he would say, "Oh no, have something. You must. How can you not have anything?" But he just passed over me, then went to the next guy and said, "What do you want to drink?" And there I was shocked, saying, "Hey, listen, I do want to drink something. I was just being polite." And cut a long story short, the entire meal, I didn't even have a glass of water because I had said no, and it was taken at face value. Now, that is a strength in America because their emphasis is direct communications, don't beat around the bush. And of course, in Asia, it is much more, you don't talk so directly. In fact, there's a funny joke that in Japan, if you want to understand Japanese culture, no means no and yes means no, which means they'll never tell you no to your face. And so different cultures are different, and there's a lot we can learn from each other. The second example actually is one about ethics and the honor principle. In my one of my first exams, which was held in the examination hall or the classroom, the invigilator gave out the paper, or the professor, and said, "Look, it's a 1.5 hour long paper. I'm going to leave the room, and I'll come back in 1.5 hours. And please do the test. And of course, honor principle, you don't talk to each other and you don't consult your notes, you just do the test." And I was amazed to find, and this was heartening, that not one person misused or abused the fact that there was no invigilator in the room. Everybody stuck to the desk, did the test, and when the invigilator came back, submitted it. There was no talking, no referring to crib sheets or notes, nothing, nothing. And it was quite a revelation for me. And number two was another example where the professor, another course, said that, "Look, you're going to have a take-home exam." And I was wondering, what is a take-home exam? So he went on to explain that, "I'll give you the exam. They're in sealed packets, individual sealed packets. You take it home and you have 3 days. You need to submit it after 3 days. You need to pick 2 hours anytime in those 3 days and do it at home or in the library, wherever you want to do it. The only conditions are that from the time you start, you need to finish in 2 hours. You can't do it in installments. It has to be one stretch of 2 hours. It's open book, so you can refer to your textbook and notes. That's not a problem. But you can't speak to anybody. You can't take help from anybody. And I was amazed. I said, "Wow!" So not only, excuse me, not only are we doing it at home, but we're looking at the books, etc. But even the time is being done under the honor principle. And sure enough, if people were abusing this, you would expect that everybody would get 100% or an A grade. But people stuck to the rules, and the grade distribution turned out to be normal. I mean, we were not told our grades, but the distribution would be showed. And the distribution showed that people, some people got C, some got B, some got A's. It was a normal distribution, which means people kept to the honor code. So for me, these two were amazing examples of learnings, and I really think there's a lot, to admire from American culture. Of course, every culture has its negatives and downsides, and I won't go into that today. But in terms of directness of communication, and in terms of following the honor principle, at least in the top colleges, it may not be true in every place, but following the honor principle and trusting people were amazing takeaways for me. So anyhow, I hope this is useful to you. So next time, if you're a first-time visitor to America and an American host asks you if you want something to drink and you want to have some water with your lunch or your dinner, please don't be shy. Ask for it. All right, take care and see you tomorrow. Bye.